All right. Today is March 4th, 2021. I am James Donnelly, and I am here today with the Samuel Proctor Oral History Program. And we are talking to Dalton Helvey to tell us about his experience as a first-generation college student and going through the Machen, Florida Opportunity Scholars Program. All right. How are you doing, Dalton?
Doing good, man. Just took my last exam before spring break to this morning, so I'm a lot more less stressed than I was last night, so that's good.
Yeah. And you're in dental school here at UF, is that right?
Yep, that is correct. I'm in my first year, so
All right.
grinding out the bookwork.
Um, so if we could kind of maybe build to this moment in your life, I think that would be a good way to, do this
Yeah.
interview. So starting kind of broadly, could you just tell me about what it means to be a first generation college student, what it means to you, maybe what it means to your family or just what you think it means to other people?
Yeah, absolutely. I think when you look at that heavily loaded question, to me, what it means to be a first generational college student, especially at this level of my education, pursuing my degree in dental, in the dental industry, becoming a dentist one day. It's really exciting. I think it's something I'm kind of like discovering uncharted waters for my family per se, for me personally, as well as for my family. No one in my family has yet graduated from college with their bachelor's degree. A lot of them work in different industries around the state of Florida, but being able to look forward to in 3 years being a dentist is just something super exciting to me. I know there's more challenges to come, face a lot of challenges, but when I look at being a first generational college student, there's a level of kind of challenge to that, because I think a lot of times it's easy to think like, oh, like if it doesn't work out, it's fine. Like it wasn't meant to be. I don't know anyone who's gone to dental school, like in my family per se, and done those things. But to know that one day in 3 years from now, like I'll be a dentist, it's like, hey, like I'm gonna put that challenge to myself, and I'm gonna put my head down when it gets hard, and do whatever it takes to get there. But to me, that's exciting. For some people, that may be very different. That may be fearful. And then I know for my family, it's like just a super proud moment for them as well. Like my mom probably brags about me to other people more than I want her to, especially when I'm around. And I think everyone has that experience, some sense with different parental figures. But for me, I think in the back of my mind, knowing there's a first generational student aspect to that is something special, because it kind of shows to other first generational students, like, hey, you don't have to follow the path of your parents or of your grandparents or your aunts or your uncles. Like, just because you don't know anyone who has done this in going to college or got this degree or this certification, like it doesn't mean you can't do it. And so I think it's really cool being able to know more people who have done that for the first time in their families, because it's kind of a reassuring thing. It's a resource. It's a confidence builder. So yeah, there's a lot of components to that question, and I know I kind of circle around it a lot, but in a nutshell, that's kind of what it means to me, I guess.
Great. When do you think you realized that you were that you had that first generation college student identity? Did you realize that, before college even started, when you were really little, or was that something you realized once you got the MFOS scholarship?
Yeah, I think it was probably more than it being like a one dawning moment. It was probably a series of things that happened. But I don't think those series of things, I didn't realize those series of things were unfolding until they were. And that probably happened in my first entire year at the University of Florida as a MFOS scholar, all the way from attending the first year student class where we were in with other MFOS scholars, and kind of networking with them, getting to know them, having a peer mentor, and then just interacting with the MFOS staff as well. I think all these different interactions and trainings and things I was a part of and in some sense required to go to, it kind of unfolded the idea of what it truly meant to be first generational. I know coming into college, I was like, oh, I have a first generational scholarship because my parents don't have a bachelor's degree or a 4-year degree equivalent. And I knew what it meant more on a definition level. But as far as the identity goes, I don't think I really grasped the importance until I got around other first generational students. That was other students in the MFOS program, as well as I started getting involved on campus, I started meeting other people who were first generational students, both MFOS scholars and non-scholars. And it was just really encouraging, like, hey, there's a community of us. And there you can see like the sense of excitement and not so much a sense of shame. It can be something that like, oh man, I'm kind of embarrassed. My parents didn't go to college. But when you get into that community, it's an exciting thing. It's like, hey, we're in this together. And like we have so much potential to do whatever we want with our education. And I think there's a lot of energy behind that community. And it's really exciting to be a part of.
Great. So how, I guess, can you take me a little bit through like how you progress towards college? So I guess in high school, or you could go even before that, just kind of how your mindset was academic wise. Did you ever think about certain colleges? You can go through the whole application process. I don't know where you applied or if you only
Right.
applied to UF. Take me through some of that.
Yeah, so going way back as an elementary student, middle school student, I always excelled in academic courses. I did very well in school. And so it was kind of always in my radar to go to college. I didn't really know what it entailed. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I had no plans, but I knew like after high school, the idea is make good grades now in high school so that you can go to a good college and you'll study something so that you can get a good job. And then the path kind of follows. But I think in middle school, I actually came across an opportunity and applied for a scholarship called Take Stock in Children, which is also another first generational college scholarship program. And so I was awarded that scholarship, I believe in 6th or 7th grade. And I received a mentor in the community. And he was a school board member, a really awesome guy that he graduated from the University of Florida, actually, and so did his kids. There's no biasness in me coming to the UF due to our relationship at all. That came later when I started looking into the dental field. But as I started looking into the reality of what was coming after high school, and I knew college was involved at some level, I started thinking about, okay, where would I want to go? I never even thought about going out of state because I was just like, there's too many colleges here in Florida. Why would I ever go out of state? And being first generational, that was another probably thing that kind of affected me. Like I didn't even really look into anything out of state for undergraduate because I'm from Sebring, Florida, South Central area. So we're like 2 hours from University of South Florida, 3 hours from Gainesville, 3 to 4 hours from University of Miami. So I was like, there's all these big universities right around me. I'll go to one of those. And so I actually also, while I was in high school, came across the idea of going to a military academy. So I was like, oh, maybe I would like to go to a military academy. I would love to serve in the military one day, but I still want to get my college degree. What does that look like? And when I get ideas on my mind, like I just don't stop until I know like every detail about it. And so I started looking into military academies, and I actually, for majority of my high school career, I wanted to go to the Coast Guard Academy. And so that was my plan. And I went there maybe summer between sophomore, junior year, between I think it was between junior, senior year, actually. So like right before you start applying to all your colleges, I went to a visit basically up there. And I just found it wasn't for me. There was no connecting factor. I didn't really meet people that I was excited to go there. The opportunities to study different focuses were more mathematics and government based. And while I was very good at math, I never really had any interest in studying math beyond high school. And so there just wasn't a lot of things pointing in that direction. And then in the back of my mind, I also had these other scholarships that were kind of like laid there. And I was like, well, I would hate to throw those things away to go to a military academy. And so rolling into my senior year, I'm thinking, okay, well, if I'm not going to go to the military academy, which is what I've been planning to do for the last 3 to 5 years, what in the world am I going to do? So I just kind of started sitting down, thinking through like, what do I like to do? What do I want to do? What do I not want to do? And I always knew I wanted to work with people. I love just people interaction, working on a team and being around others. And so I started thinking through those things. And one thing that came to mind was a dentist, and my mom is a dental assistant. And so I'd always been around the dental office as a kid, and my mom loved what she did and loved the people she worked for and worked with. And so I thought, oh, maybe I'd like to be a dentist. And I love working with my hands. I love fixing things. I remember being a kid, building like little toy model cars with my grandpa, and that was like just fine-tuned motor skills. And so I started connecting these dots. I was like, maybe I want to be a dentist one day. And so I started shadowing and doing all those things and found that I really liked it. And so rolling into my senior year of high school, I was like, well, I guess I better find a college that I want to go to, that I can get a dental education in. And so University of Florida is the only public university in the state of Florida that has a dental school. There's 2 other private universities here in the state of Florida. But I started to think, okay, well, if I want to go to the University of Florida for dental school, I'd done my research. I saw how great of an institution it was. I was like, if I want to go to dental school there, then I probably, in my mind, not really knowing much about the college pathway, I was like, I better go to undergrad there if I want to go to dental school there. So that's kind of what got me to apply to the University of Florida. I did apply to, I think, USF and FAU here in Florida as potential backup plans if University of Florida didn't work out. And then, yeah, I got accepted. And what was kind of like, being successful in academics throughout my life, and even up until this point, my family is never really shocked or really surprised when I get like good educational news. And so it's kind of always hard to be really excited for something. So for me, when I got into the University of Florida, I had straight A's in high school, relatively good ACT scores. I was involved, community service, yada, yada, yada. And so there was not a huge excitement factor that I was going to go to the University of Florida. And so the excitement factor really set in when I actually was awarded the MFOS scholarship. When I realized it was a scholarship that was going to not only pay my tuition, but my cost of attendance. And I started thinking through that, and I was like, well, maybe this is a bigger deal than I realized. And I would say I didn't realize how big of a deal it was until throughout my first semester, when I realized, like, hey, if I didn't have this scholarship, I don't know how I would pay for rent. I don't know how I would find the money for food. My parents just didn't have the ability to support a college student outside of home. And so, sure, I had Bright Futures and the other scholarship program. Those things probably would have taken care of my tuition. But as we know, there's so much more than tuition and fees when you're attending a public university, especially living outside of home. And so I would have probably had to pick up a job, and my course might look very different than what it looks like today. And so I think once I got to the University of Florida and really understood what it meant and what MFOS was providing, things just started shifting there. I gained a lot of confidence and excitement for what could come even after my bachelor's degree.
Did your, whenever you got the MFOS like official notice that you received that, did that give your parents any sense of excitement, or was that mostly just for you?
Yeah, I think, my parents were always like, they're always happy for the things I was awarded. And I think, I'm not trying to brag on myself or anything, but like in high school, when I received these different awards and things for the end of the year and GPA awards or whatever, like they're always happy. Of course, they're happy. But, I remember seeing videos, and you still see videos today of acceptance day or decision day. you know, these families like getting around the computer and like they open that letter and there's like a freak out moment. We got in because like there's a chance maybe we weren't going to get in. And so I never really had those moments with things. It was kind of like always expected that Dalton was going to be successful educationally. I've actually found out I was accepted to UF. I was working one day at the YMCA when the notices came out, and I was on the computer for like 2 hours trying to get into the system and figure out if I got in. I got in. I was happy. Everybody else was happy, of course, but it wasn't like we're throwing everything in the air, running around screaming. Same thing with MFOS. I think my scholarship of Take Stock in Children, the advisor for that in my county, knew about MFOS before I ever found out about it. And she told me, hey, like, you're going to eventually get some more information. I forget what all was sent out as far as financial aid applications and scholarship applications. She was like, make sure you find this one, you apply for it. And so when I was awarded, I think there was a lot of excitement in my family. But again, I don't think they really understood what it meant for cost of attendance to be provided for by a scholarship versus, you know, tuition or whatever it was. So having not been to college, I think it was hard for them to really grasp like what all it was going to entail. And while they're absolutely happy, I think for me, when I started to unfold like just what all was going to be taken off my plate, it was more of an excitement for me, more something like, man, like this is a big deal. This is something that I can really use to my advantage more than I ever would have thought. And so, yeah, I think like I said, there's excitement all the way around. I think some of my mentors and faculty members at my high school probably were more excited because they knew what the program was and what it was going to mean for my future than some other people like my friends and family around me who really didn't know what it was. They just know something else Dalton was awarded and like, good job, what's new? And so that response kind of gets old, you know, because you don't really realize how big of a deal things are when that happens.
Yeah, so awards like MFOS, or you mentioned Take Stock in Children a couple times. I mean, those are obviously big markers, I think. It sounds like for you in your life. And can you imagine a world where, like, if you didn't get Take Stock in Children, like what would your life, do you have any idea what it would have looked like? You know, how would things have progressed differently, you think?
Yeah, you know, I think there's a couple of things that come to mind that thinking about what life would look like without these different programs and scholarships. I see myself as an undergraduate student who struggled with a lot of just stress, being stressed about, because I wouldn't have fallen back on my parents because there's really no option to fall back on my parents for them to provide everything as far as finances for rent and food and gas and all those things. While there would have been some help, there still would have been a lot of emphasis on me either finding a job that I was able to work enough hours and provide for those things, or I was going to have to take out loans for my undergraduate degree and live off of loans. And now that I'm in dental school and doing just that, because there's no grand scheme besides there are some options that will pay for professional school, but none that fit my plan for my life. But I would have lived off of loans, and now being in dental school, I would have been to this day still stressing about those loans, even after they were used and done their history. But I still today would be stressing about them because I'm not able to be in the workforce paying off those loans. Who knows how much they would have been. And because I'm very much a budgeter, and I always have my finances in mind. And so even to this day, thinking about the loans that I have for dental school, I'm kind of like chomping at the bit to get out of dental school so I can pay those things off. And so I think that stress would have just affected me in so many other ways. It would have, you know, absolutely would affect me academically. My grades probably wouldn't have been as good. They certainly could have been better, but they wouldn't have been as good as they were because I probably would have had to spend a lot more time at a job, making sure that I had enough money. I wouldn't have been able to be involved in some of the academic or extracurriculars I was involved in. The University of Florida, I was heavily involved at rec sports, the recreation center on campus. I actually worked there part-time, but the job wasn't like a requirement for me. It was something I was glad to be a part of. It was a family that I had there. And I was also involved in different honors societies, and I was actually a peer mentor for MFOS. So all those things that contribute, I look back at my undergraduate, I had a lot of free time. I filled that free time with a ton of things that I loved doing, that were passions of mine, being a youth leader at a local church. I wouldn't have had time for those things if it wasn't for Take Stock in Children and Machen for Opportunity Scholarship programs, because I would have been stressed either about having to work enough, or stressed about these loans, and trying to also work so that I can maybe try to pay these loans and minimize that. So it definitely is a game changer. And if I struggled academically, I may not be where I am today here in dental school, 3 years away from having a DMD and being a dentist in the future, and where I'll be able to pay off those loans and not stress as much about them. So who knows where I'd be, honestly. It can be all over the place.
Right. To talk a little bit about community at UF, and in the past few years, since you, I guess, received the scholarship, I know that there are some, non-financial assets to the scholarships, support networks. If you can talk a little bit about that, maybe some of the support networks that came along with MFOS, or even just your own paths that you paved. How did you build a community, and what does that kind of community or support network look like?
Yeah, I think that's really good, because ultimately I'm a huge community person. Wanting to be a dentist one day, obviously that it makes sense. I thrive on being around people. So in order for me to have been successful in my undergraduate degree, I had to have community. And so I had probably multiple different communities of people that I was involved with. One of them I mentioned being rec sports. That was kind of my work community per se. And I say work, and that's just because I was paid to work there. But a lot of my free time was spent with those people outside of work. And so we did lots of things together, trips outside of school, and just hanging out and spending free time together. Some of them were my roommates. And so a lot of relationships were formed there at rec sports. We played intramural sports together. And so that was one community I had there at rec sports, and formed relationships that I still have today with some of my best friends. We were in each other's weddings, and even though we live states apart, like, we'll always remain in tight contact with one another. I also had a community of individuals that were other youth leaders at my church. Religion and my faith is a foundation of my life. And so as soon as I was able to get connected to people in my church, when I moved to Gainesville and found that church.
And what denomination?
It's Greenhouse Church here in Gainesville. And so it's an Assemblies of God church here in Gainesville. And they actually have a campus, or when I was an undergraduate in pre-COVID days, they had a service that happened on campus here on Sunday night. And so it was really cool just to go to. Growing up in a very small town, in my church, there were not, let alone college students. There were barely many high school students. And so I come from a really old county in general. I think the average age is around 60 to 70 years old. And so being able to go to church with a bunch of people my same age that had similar interests as me was just super encouraging. And so I quickly formed a community there. I had a bunch of guys that we get together and play sports together, and we'll, again, go on trips together and just live life together. And so there was these different things that I was able to disconnect from the stress of studying and worrying about getting good grades so that I can get into dental school one day, and just live life and kind of be disconnected. And so that came from rec sports, from my friends from church there. And as well as then I had the component of MFOS. I think that was probably my third biggest, or one of my top three communities, all the way from my first year. I had a peer mentor, and we had a peer mentor group, and my peer mentor was great. She was very adamant about connecting us and getting us familiar with campus and with one another and their resources. And at first I was kind of like, okay, why are we going to the Career Resource Center together? I have a job. I can find a job one day. I know what an interview is, whatever. But I didn't realize like all the opportunities that the Career Resource Center offered. And so a lot of that came from having that MFOS community. And so my second year, I was able to become a peer mentor myself. And so I gained another community within that community of other peer mentors and as of the mentees that I had. And so each year I just found that community kind of slowly growing and growing. And it became more valuable and valuable. for instance, Leslie Pendleton, Dr. Pendleton, she is from day one, she just seems so approachable. She, and a lot of times I would describe her as the mom of everyone in MFOS. And I know that's too much of a title for her to take on, but that's the vibe of the relationship you get from her. The open door policy, and just very warm and welcoming. And so you really feel like when you step into an MFOS event, you're stepping into kind of a family gathering. Not so much just another conference that I have to attend, or just another meeting to check off a list of a requirement, but you really feel like you belong, and you have people behind you that really care. And if there's things you're struggling with, whether it's a class, I remember her sending emails like, hey, midpoint in the semester, if you have a class you're struggling with, like, come and talk to me. And while she may not be able to tutor you in organic chemistry, like, she's going to find someone who can help you, or she's going to help you find resources. And so this is nice having those people right here that you can walk in their door and get any kind of connection that you need educationally. And then even now, after, even though I'm no longer in the program as a scholar, being an alumni, seeing the interaction of alumni through our Facebook group and the different events that we are able to have with COVID, it's just really cool to see that community didn't stop when we graduated. People still long to not only be a part of MFOS programs, but to really like put their effort into seeing it continue to grow and impact lives.
Great. You talked a little bit about where you grew up. I wonder if you can talk more about that, how you think that maybe affected, you growing up, your household, maybe ultimately your journey going forward, or just a little bit about, you growing up and how you think that kind of plays into your life.
Yeah, so I grew up in Sebring, Florida. It's in Highlands County, a very small town. Well, I say small town, it's not small compared to some people who are from really, really small town. But compared to Gainesville, it's very small. And so growing up there, I loved it. I wouldn't change anything about it. And in fact, like me and my friends still to this day, some of my best friends from high school, we always talk about how Sebring really is the best place to grow up. And it's the best place to like raise a family. But then we also said that you have to at least get out of Sebring at some point. And it's fine if you come back, but you have to get an experience outside of Sebring. And I think especially in today's world, that's so critical, because I was exposed to things outside of Sebring that I never would have been exposed to otherwise. And so I'm so thankful for those experiences and be able to use them. And I hope to one day go back to Sebring and practice dentistry potentially, and whatever that looks like. But I always have family there, so I'll be there and be connected to Sebring in some sense. But growing up there, ultimately the only things to really do is to get involved in sports. So I grew up playing baseball my entire life, and then in high school I also started wrestling, and my brothers played baseball, basketball, and football. And so we were all heavily involved in sports, because if you're not involved in sports, there's not a whole lot of other things to do besides get in trouble, which is very unfortunate. But ultimately, I think it allowed us to have friendships that we literally will carry on with us for the rest of our lives. And so growing up in Sebring, being a small town, everyone's family kind of knows other people's family. And that's what's another kind of exciting thing is, that like, while I'm in dental school, there's a couple other students from Sebring that are in dental school, and it's kind of a small network of us. So while we have our families supporting us, but there's also a lot of people in our communities who are really excited for us continuing our education in that sense. But ultimately, I think Sebring is it's a very family-driven community in that sense, that you kind of have the support of your high school teachers and the people who are kind of knew you through playing sports, especially when you play with the same kids year after year after year. You really grow that sense of community that it's always nice to go home to. It's like refreshing, like, hey, we're going to go home for this weekend or during this break and just relax. And it's nice to see people at restaurants that and because you go to places in Gainesville and you might see someone that but that's just by chance. But there's so many more people here that it's not very likely. And I mean, I remember coming to University of Florida thinking Gainesville was a really big city for me, Archer Road, stress to drive on and all of those things. And then there's a lot of people from South Florida in the sense of Miami, Fort Lauderdale, and there's even a lot of people from Jacksonville here that consider Gainesville to be like a small country podunk town. And so I'm like, what? I just remember being confused. And so, and it's just so cool to have that confusion, because then you realize like, hey, every place isn't really like Sebring, and places have different things. They have different people. They have different opportunities. And being from that background, I'm so thankful to have that hometown community, family support. But then to be able to get out into a city like Gainesville, where you have the University of Florida and tons of diversity and so much opportunity. I mean, when you think about the research that goes on here, and you think about just all the education and the growth and the professionalism, like I obviously wouldn't have that same experience if I never made it out. And so now for me, it's kind of an important thing to be able to take that back to my home community and put that into practice somehow, whether I'm a dentist or whatever I do there. It's kind of a sense of responsibility to do that. And so I'm excited for it. I love Sebring. There are times where, it's small and you got to get out, but that's the greatest thing we always tell people is like, you're really only like an hour and a half from anything. You're an hour and a half from the beach, an hour and a half from Orlando, you're an hour, 2 hours from the other coast. So, and then everywhere there's lakes and there's rivers and creeks and all kinds of stuff to do outside. So we grew up outside playing sports, fishing, and all of those fun things. And so hopefully one day my kids will have that same opportunity.
Yeah, definitely. Was there any challenges coming from a smaller city to a bigger city, even though I know Gainesville's not the biggest of cities in Florida? Were there any challenges that came with that?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Because I just remember even in my first semester, you come from a really small town where there's not a lot to do, and you come to Gainesville, a college town where still there's not, it's not the biggest city. Like you said, it's not, I couldn't imagine going to University of Central Florida in Orlando, where you literally have theme parks all over the place, plus everything we have in Gainesville and more. But coming to Gainesville, there definitely were challenges because I'm very much an explorer. I like to find new things to do and new places, especially new restaurants is one of my favorite things. And so coming to Gainesville was like, man, there's so many places to eat. Like there's just tons of places. Like prior to Gainesville, I don't know if I ever even ate Chipotle or Moe's. I did have Chick-fil-A like less than 5 times. And then you get into like all the local restaurants and even where Gainesville is today. Like it's grown so much since 2013, which is when I first came to Gainesville from the University of Florida. And so there are definitely challenges of like, hey, how do I balance my time to make sure that I'm good educationally and can focus on classes, but also like I'm here for a reason. Like I'm here to, I just can't lock myself in a room and only study and not make friends. Like these 4 years of being in my undergraduate were some of the most important for building some of those communities and getting to know people, because there are relationships that I formed then that I'll have forever. And so you definitely have to have that balance and realize like, hey, where do I draw the line on how much fun to have and how and when I need to tell my friends like, hey, I can't do anything this weekend because I have some exams next week or whatever that looks like. And so there definitely were challenges socially. There were definitely challenges as well as academically, because when you come to the University of Florida, it's a prestigious institution. Classes aren't easy. I was used to I won't say easy classes, but not really having to study like you do at a university, and a collegiate level classes. And so when you get here, it's like, oh, like the way I studied in high school of just looking at my homework assignments the night before a test, like I can't do that. I need to build a study plan and follow that study plan. And like, what does that even mean? What does it look like? And so the great thing is Gainesville has tons of resources, but there's challenges of like, hey, what resources do I need to use? Because you can spend a lot of money and waste a lot of money on different resources. There are free resources that you can use that if you don't know about them, then you're going to spend money doing the same thing. And so that's where I think the community of MFOS came in and was so important, because there was always someone, whether it was a mentor or a fellow classmate, that I could text and be like, hey, how are you studying for this class? I had a mentor who took similar classes to me, and I would ask her like, hey, how did you prepare for these exams? Because I've never taken a chemistry class ever. And from what I heard, like these exams are rough. So there's challenges all over the place, and you just learn how to adapt and make it work.
Yeah. What were some of those social challenges? And specifically, did you ever feel, like an outsider maybe because of the first generation identity that you carry with you?
Mhm.
Did having the MFOS feel uncomfortable at any moment or anything like that?
Yeah, I think to say I felt like an outsider wouldn't necessarily be true, just because I feel like I always am able to socially adapt and make friends very quickly. But there definitely are barriers when you think about being a first generational student. For instance, there's different things I wanted to be involved in on campus, and that I knew took a significant amount of money, whether that was joining a fraternity or a different club or whatever it was. And um, I'm looking at, okay, this is the budget I have to live off of, and if I want to live over here with these friends next year, this is how much it costs. Or if I want to join this fraternity, this is how much it costs. Or if I want to do this or that, like this is how much it's going to cost. This is how much money I have. And because being first generational, I knew I really couldn't fall back on my parents like, hey, I need a couple $1,000s for this semester to do this, and I need it every semester. Whereas I know I had lots of friends who weren't first generational that it was expected that they were going to be living in this neighborhood at this apartment, and they're going to be involved in this, and it costs a lot of money, but their parents are going to write that check, and it's not going to be an issue. So there were definitely social boundaries that I had to realize, like, hey, there's just things that I might not be able to be involved in. Um, and that's okay. And I had to be okay with that. But there's also just social boundaries and like, um, as far as like recognizing my resources. And ultimately, I feel like I had, other than finances, like I had all the resources everybody else had. But definitely being able to recognize and balance those things. And I think, standing in a crowd, if I'm at a social gathering or with a group of friends and we're doing something, I never felt like, oh, am I the only non-first generational student here? Like, I never really had that pressure, but there were times where I might have been like hesitant to really even announce that because you you never know like whose family comes from where, and unless someone. But what was crazy was the minute someone said, oh yeah, I'm a first generational student, yada yada yada, when someone else would announce it, you're like, oh yeah, me too. So like there's a longing to be a part of that community, but there's definitely hesitation to like step out and say like, yeah, that's who I am. And so which is very interesting for me, especially when I think about today's world, being a white male in today's society. That's something I don't have to broadcast, but I can think about minorities and their situations that they're facing in our culture, and just being like, hey, like they don't have to step out and say that they're a minority, but recognizing the feelings they might have, like, hey, when there's community, like they're stronger, and so for them to just step out and be out on their own in a group of other people who are not minorities can be so challenging. And so I've had that sense of that feeling being a first generational student, and I don't think it's affected me majorly in the same sense that it's affected minorities in our country. But I definitely value that experience and valuing that emotion and how it impacts people.
Great. I understand that MFOS has some like certain requirements. Like I think I heard that there was like a managing your, like they help kids with managing their finances, right? When they
Yes.
first get that, fat sum of money,
Oh,
that
yes.
can be a pretty difficult task. Can you talk about some of those aspects of the program and, some of the most helpful parts to you?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing of how the progression of those seminars were scaled. So in your first year, your first couple seminars are more focused on how to build a budget and all the things that you're going to need to potentially spend money on, and things that college students don't think about as far as like health insurance. Like, are you on your parents' health insurance or are you not? If you're not, like the university requires it. So that money is going to come out of your MFOS money. And do you pay car insurance? Do you pay a phone bill? Like all those different things that when you're living at home in high school, you might not really think about. And so it was nice, those entry level programs kind of getting you in, getting you acquainted. Some students just had no idea that, again, since like I said earlier, like I just did my research like crazy. Anytime I get my mind on something, I find out every detail. So I was understanding that, okay, I'm going to get this amount of money, twice a year, and it has to make me last through the summer. Like that was one thing that, we didn't get financial aid disbursement in the summer, but our fall and our spring was a little bit more. So you need to be a budgeter to make sure you realize, like, hey, I need to save some of this money so that in the summer when I don't get financial aid, I have money to pay rent and I have money to buy food and all of those things. So the seminars that we went through, MFOS, throughout the different semesters, exactly prepared us for those moments. And so I think that was super valuable. And then as you go through your 4 years, the scale of the seminars start to change. They start to change towards, how to, I want to say, like, how to contract negotiate when you're looking for a job one day. Like, this is your value. Like, you can negotiate a contract and a salary, like, and what that looks like and what that means. And as well as, like, okay, now when you graduate college and you have a salary, like, this is kind of the budget items you're looking at. And so it might not be university health insurance, it might be private insurance. And so it's really, I think there's kind of probably this joke around our society of high school of how we always learned the Pythagorean theorem and all these different things, but no one really taught anyone how to fill out a check and file their taxes and apply for a mortgage. And so I think MFOS really stepped in the gap with a lot of those components. They, if someone didn't have a bank account coming to college on their own, MFOS encouraged them, like, hey, get your own bank account, because if this money goes into your family's account, like, that could get mixed up. And then if the money gets spent, it's spent, and now you have big issues at hand. And so there's all kinds of different just topics. And even if they weren't covered, like, the presenters were super open, like, hey, contact me if you have more questions on this. And so it was just really encouraging to have those things that were kind of programmed for us to prepare us for what's coming next, in a sense. And so I wish I had a list of the names of the different seminars we went to, but I knew some of them I was more prepared for others. Like, if they were budgeting meetings, I might have been already thinking on some of those things, but no matter what, there was always some gap that I was like, oh, I didn't think about that. They talked about, they helped prepare us, like, for debt payoff. While we probably weren't having to take student loans being MFOS, like, a lot of students may have credit card debt or things like that from high school, or their families may have different debt, and they may be tempted to use some of their scholarship money to help out families back home. And so they really helped us balance those things and the importance of budgeting, which is extremely critical throughout the 4 years, because I think the budget skills you develop in college are what you're probably going to use for the rest of your life. So
yeah, that seems like a really important program to me. And kind of similar, like, related to that, I've heard that a lot of MFOS kids, and I don't know if you've noticed this or how much you've noticed this, tend to go into college very focused on some field that, there's like a direct line to a job. Like a really vocational mindset going into college from the first day. I wonder, you are obviously in dental school. That's, that's a professional degree that is kind of following that trend. I wonder how you have thought about that, if you've noticed that, and then maybe what your friends outside of MFOS did. There's people always talk about certain degrees that people say, oh, whatever degree, someone will never get a job. Like, how are you going to get a job doing, having your major in degree X? I wonder if you ever encountered that and how you thought about that. Yeah,
absolutely. Definitely, I think inside and outside, all together. I can't speak for other universities, I didn't go, but at UF, a lot of students are thinking, they plan their major off of what job they want one day. And so, for instance, if someone says, hey, I want to go to med school to be a doctor, or be a pediatric doctor, or whatever that is, if I want to be a dentist, I want to be a physical therapist, like, I need to do this degree, and that will line me up for that. And so I think with that, on a more focused spectrum of first generational students, it can be the sense of, hey, if I say I'm going to go to college and get a degree in this, I need to be able to like have basically a plan to, so if someone says, hey, like, why are you even going to college? Why is it important? What do you want to do? If I say I'm getting a degree in TikTok, they're going to be like, well, that's crazy. And while it might be a passion of theirs, obviously that's not a real thing. It might be one day, who knows? But ultimately, I think there's kind of a sense of like, I have to have everything figured out. Like if I'm telling someone, especially maybe a parent, like, hey, I'm going to go to college and get a degree, the parent might be like, well, what degree are you going to get? And how is it going to help you get a good job? There's a lot of people that make good money and provide a good income for their family with no college degree at all. And so there can be that pressure of, hey, if you're going to go to college, you need to make sure it's going to get you a good job. And it needs to look like A, B, and C. And so I think, outside of that, a lot of people who have people in their family who have gone to college and gotten different degrees. And because a lot of times you find people that have degrees and work in a completely different field, and they know it might eventually work out. Maybe they have more experience with that and have different people around them who had that similar experience. I mean, I had a math teacher in high school, a calculus teacher, her degree was in biology. And I remember being like, how are you a math teacher? Like, that doesn't make sense. And so there may be other people that realize like, hey, if I get a business degree, that doesn't mean I have to own a business. That means I could get into real estate. I could work with medical sales. I can work with like all these different things. Shoot, I could even go to law school with a business degree. I can go to dental. I have a friend who is graduating dental school from the University of Michigan, and he has an engineering degree. And so I remember when I heard that, I was like, engineering is very hard at the University of Florida. And I was like, on top of your engineering courses, you're going to also have to take science courses to get into dental school. Like, why don't you just take your science courses and not do engineering? And so he's had it all figured out. The guy's going to be an orthodontist in the next several years. And engineering plays a lot of role in that, especially he was a materials engineer. But ultimately, I think coming from a background where you might not know as much about college and what that looks like and graduating and getting a job, you feel like, especially for me, I always had to feel like I had things planned out in my life. So I said, okay, if I want to go to dental school, I got to get this degree. And so I might think, oh, if I want to own my own construction company one day, then I have to get a degree in this. Or if I want to own this, I have to get a degree in this. And so I definitely think there's a lot of pressure, and there definitely is, stigma around different things, unfortunately. And so I remember being at Preview, which is the orientation for first year students. At least that's what it was called then. I'm not sure if it's the same thing now, but where you sit down with your coordinator and you plan your first semester, you pick out your classes and you kind of declare your degree. You can change it then. But I remember people saying like, oh yeah, I want to go to med school, so I'm just going to do this degree because it's a lot easier and I can still get in. And then other people are like, well, if you don't get into med school, what kind of job are you going to get with that degree? And so there's all this stigma around like, hey, a degree can get you a job 1, 2, 3, and 4. This degree can get you jobs 5, 6, 7, 8. And so we know now after college, like that's really not a reality. While certain jobs will prepare you certain technical skills for that, I think having that experience and knowing that is super valuable, super critical. Otherwise, you can spend a lot of time studying things that you're not interested in and wasting a lot of your time and a lot of your stress and energy on things. I remember at Preview, someone told me one time, like, hey, if you want to go to law school, they knew someone who got their bachelor's in theater, performing arts, and they're in law school. And I will never forget that, because like, how is that possible? Sure, they took their courses that were required for law school entry, but they got to study what they really loved. And so for me, I studied nutrition. And so the entrance courses for dental school fell under that major, but that's not why I chose it. I originally was biology because I thought, oh, if I want to go to dental school, I have to study like biology or something scientific. And the more I started looking into all the courses I was going to be taking, I was kind of like, yeah, I'm not that into cells. Biology still to this day is one of my weakest courses or subjects. And so I started looking into different things, talking to different people, and I found nutrition. I've always been very interested in nutrition. Being an athlete growing up, you always kind of pay attention to what you eat and all these things and how they affect your body. And so I was like, I would love to study nutrition, something that I know has direct applicable effect and I can kind of relate to versus like looking at cells for 4 years. And I know biology is very different than that. But that was my mindset at the time. And so, yeah, it's just a matter of experience and having people on your team that can say, hey, like, you can study different things and make it work in different routes in life.
Mm-hmm. When do you think you realized that one job can, people from a range of degrees can end up working in one job or going to a certain professional school? Was that before college ever started? Was that only after college, or was that during when you met people?
Yeah, that definitely wasn't until I got into college and started meeting more people. And I would say meeting more people during my time working at Rec Sports. I worked in the fitness center there, and we always got to interact with different students and different patrons in the facilities. And one thing I would always do is on their university ID, if they were in a professional program, it would say which one, like it would say College of Dentistry or College of Pharmacy, and so College of Medicine. So, and I would ask them usually like, oh, you're in College of Dentistry. Where'd you do your undergrad? What'd you study? And what I found is like no one really was ever the same. And so it was really interesting, meeting someone from College of Medicine who studied history, and you're like, wait, what? And it's a conversation opener. And the more interactions I had like that, and the more I started to meet people who were already out of college, that would come and do different networking events at the school and come and talk to us. They've already graduated, had their degree, and they're like, yeah, I got my degree in advertising, but I actually work for this company doing something that's not advertising. And so I started to put pieces together of like, oh, okay, maybe there's not a direct correlation. Like, sure, it might help, but there's not a one size fits all for degrees and jobs.
I guess going back a little bit, can you tell me a little bit about your parents? What their role in your life has been, what their occupations are. I know you mentioned that your mom is a dental hygienist, I believe. Yeah, if you can just talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so my dad, and throughout my entire life, has always worked kind of like a sales representative position for different food distributors in the area in our town. So it's always been like he worked for Coca-Cola for a while. He worked for Budweiser for a while as a sales representative, and now he works for Flowers Foods, who does a lot of different dry foods like breads and nature's own bread and Sweet 16 donuts and things like that. The good stuff that are bad for your teeth. But anyways, so he's always worked for different companies like that throughout my life, and so. Like I said, my mom is a dental assistant, and so she's always worked at a dental office my entire life before I was born even. And there were times in my life, though, where my mom actually worked two jobs. My parents were separated when I was very young, I believe first grade. And so for most of my life, I lived with my mom. And for most of that time, she was working two jobs to provide for our family. So she worked as a dental assistant during the day. And some nights and weekends, she would work as a waitress or restaurant manager, so at various restaurants in town. And a lot of times it was to take off some of the financial stress on our family. And she always enjoyed what she did. She loved people interaction, but it did wear her down a lot too. So my parents both worked many hours, typically Monday through Friday, and my dad basically with his type of work, he really works every day a little bit. And so that was always interesting as a kid because, playing sports and being in and out of town and stuff, there was always limitations as to how much they were going to be available. Luckily, I had grandparents in the area that, either worked most of my life, but as I got older into high school, they started to retire. So a different background of workforces in my family.
How do you think seeing your parents' economic, circumstances, or your economic circumstances growing up, did that affect you, or how did that affect you in your decision making in college? I mean, you're in dental school right now, and that's known as quite a well-paying industry.
Right.
So, like, to what degree do you think was that significant?
Yeah, I remember coming into college and them talking about, when I say them, the people at Preview and MFOS entry seminars and all these things, and different people saying people choose degrees and jobs depending on different things. And for instance, I talked about how much I love to work with people, so I'm going to choose a job that I get to work with people. But people also choose jobs and degrees for different reasons beyond that. And some of them include the amount of money you would make. For instance, my wife is a teacher, and we know teachers are very underpaid for the amount of work and the type of work they do. But my wife didn't choose that job because she wanted to make X amount of money. She chose that job because it's one of her strengths, and she loves kids, and she's really good at what she does. And so for me, that definitely was a factor when I thought about a job I wanted to do. I thrive off of consistency. And so I knew sales is not for me. Sure, there's opportunities to make a good income on sales, especially if you work at a really good car dealership or for a good realty company or whatever. Like, you can make a good amount of money doing those things, or medical sales. But I'm not a salesman. The idea of selling someone something stresses me out. And so when I was thinking about a dentist, we know dentists are typically well compensated, and that provided a lot of relief for me, knowing that one day I could work a job that I wouldn't have to stress specifically finances all the time. Like, sure, I'm going to have to be worried and focus on the business flow and all of those things. But at the end of the day, if I get sick and have to take a week or 2 weeks of work off, or I get quarantined from coronavirus or whatever it is, I know I'm financially going to be okay. And so that comes from a lot of things. It comes from my job, but also just the planning and the ability to create an emergency budget and all of those things. So when I look at my parents and growing up as a kid, they really never had that chance to get that far ahead to create that emergency budget, to where they had a cushion, like, hey, if I have to take a couple of weeks off if something happened. And so when I was thinking about career options, I was thinking like, hey, I have to, like, I see how stressed my parents are about finances. We never really went without as kids, me and my brothers. We always got to play the sports we wanted to play. We always had nice clothes and shoes, and my parents made sure they always had a way to provide for us, and we always had food. But there were definitely limitations that we had in life. Like, we didn't take as many family vacations as a lot of people did. I remember on one hand, like, multiple or several different family vacations that we took that were, I would consider, like, extravagant family vacations, like out of town, and so when I'm thinking about those things, like what I want for my kids and my future and financial stability, job definitely did play a role in that. And that came from the past that I grew up in. And so I'm thankful for how hard my parents worked. And to this day, they work extremely hard still. And I just knew that with how much I stressed myself out, I was like, I can't deal with that much stress that they have with finance. I just don't want to be in that position. Like, what can I do differently to relieve myself and my future family of that stress? So that plays a huge role in how things played out.
Yeah. Are there a couple people who jump out to you as super influential people or mentors throughout the past 4 or 5 years that you've been in college and higher education?
Yeah, I think when you look at the different segments of my life, from high school, I had a designated mentor, and this guy like coached me through different things, college application and sports struggles in high school. He was a coach and all these different things. So that would be a mentor. Then when I get into undergraduate, I probably had multiple mentors. One of my strongest mentors would be one of my best friends now, and the guy who married me. He's the college pastor at our church in town, and just someone that I always had on my side who had similar experiences to me, but we were different enough in the sense that he could come with a different perception on things. And so also just being able to always direct me in line with my faith on decisions I had to make and different things like that. And so having him in my life, not only as a friend and someone to have fun with, but when things kind of got hairy, like he graduated from the University of Florida, he knows what it takes to be a student here and to study, but also to have fun and to live a life outside of school. Having him is extremely critical, because there would be times like on the weekend, he would just say, hey, like, if you don't have any studying, like, we're just going to go do this. We're going to go out of town and we're going to go to Atlanta and hang out. And a couple of guys would get together. And so he was extremely valuable throughout those 4 years. As I graduated, my wife and I actually lived in Port-au-Prince, Haiti for 2 years after graduating from our undergraduate degrees. And we had mentors there, people who were living in the country with us, who were older families, and they were there with us on the ground. And so there's always been, different groups of people, but I would say overall, like I definitely have had consistent mentors as well. Like my friend who's a college pastor, Mike, I was telling you about earlier, from that moment I met him to this day, like we're still super close. We might get super busy, especially with dental school. I go weeks at a time without seeing many friends outside of dental school. But I think those are people that are super valuable, because we always need people who are like us in some ways, but very different from us in other ways, because they're able to kind of bring different perspectives. And if we only have mentors that are just, if for instance, all my mentors were only dental students, we would all get kind of in the same rut of thinking all the time. So it's nice to have people who are different from us to think in different ways. And so it's refreshing for sure.
Yeah. Looking forward as a beneficiary of MFOS, how do you pay that forward to others? I know you mentioned you were a peer mentor, in that second year. Yeah. Do you see yourself, just staying in touch in the future, or giving back in another way? Anything like that?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a huge proponent of giving back to what gave to you, and for the mere reason of seeing things grow and develop and become better. If people don't provide feedback and contribute to give back to things I gave to them, things kind of stay the same and they don't grow, and nothing really changes. And so for that reason, thinking of MFOS specifically and many other things I've been a part of, I really look forward to, right now as a dental student, the way in which I contribute is very minimal, but just being a part of the alumni community, and showing my support through social media when UF does UF giving days and things like that, and being a voice is one thing, as well as just being able to have been through the program and be a representative for the program outside of University of Florida, outside of Gainesville, is critical. Letting, coming from a very small town, I know a large number of families that have students that are going to be first generational college students one day. And so I'm always kind of like an advocate, like, hey, how can I get you plugged in? How can I let you know what your resources are? One of my strengths from StreamQuest is connector, and I thrive off of connecting people to resources that are beneficial to them. And so right now, over these next couple of years, like that's probably the biggest way I can contribute is keeping people connected, not only to MFOS, but just to resources in general. And then absolutely, like, I can't wait to one day be working as a dentist and participating as an alumni to MFOS, whether that's financially or with my time and attending alumni events and just networking and kind of seeing where all these other alumni are going. I think for people who are in the program right now, it's so critical for them to see where alumni are today. When I was an alum, or when I was in the program, a scholar, I remember seeing different alumni that were in dental school. And I thought, okay, there are people who go through this program who can get into dental school and become dentists. I remember seeing people who were law students and who work for different huge corporations, who work in DC and all these big cities. And so I remember thinking to myself, like, okay, if these people go through the program and are able to do more than just graduate, then so can I. And so I think as an alumni, it's so important to continue to be a voice, to be involved in that community, because who knows, there might be a scholar right now who wants to go to dental school one day. And if we're able to connect, and me being able to provide resources and connections and help them, like that's super valuable. And so I look forward to doing that and contributing in all the different ways I can throughout the rest of my life and my career, and seeing the program grow. Like I would love to hear one day that, hey, every first generational college student that is accepted to the University of Florida is able to enter the Machen Florida Opportunity Scholarship Program. And that will only happen through its alumni and supporting base.
Great. As we get towards the end here, if you had to describe the first generation experience in just one word, could you give me a word for that?
One word, first generational experience. I'm really bad with stuff like this, but
it's all right.
One word, I would probably say roller coaster. It's a roller coaster, because there's definitely times where you're on the climb. It's extremely difficult. And when it seems like when you're on a roller coaster and you're going up, you don't see what's coming in front of you. And usually what's coming in front of you is a downhill where it's fun, your hands are in the air and it's crazy. But then there will be another one, and there will be twists and turns. And so I think it's definitely a roller coaster. I think life in general is like that, but there's so many ways that you can put life as a first generational college student, graduate, whatever, into that box of being on a roller coaster.
That's amazing. I guess my last question is just, do you have any more questions for me?
No, I think really good. I enjoyed speaking with you today and providing my experience with Machen Florida Opportunity Scholarship. I'm excited to see what all you guys are doing with the projects and all those things. And it's just always nice to provide the experience that those of us who have gone through the program and get the word out there, like, hey, like this is what it looks like. Also, if whoever watches or whatever this resource becomes one day, like I'm available, more than happy to provide information, resource, connect, whatever that looks like. So feel free to contact me, as well as if you have any other further questions after our meeting or clarifications. Sometimes I get long-winded and I get confused in my thoughts, so feel free to clarify or reach out. But thank you for your time. I know it was a lengthy one, but sharing stories is I love sharing stories. And when I get to share mine, it's one thing, and I love getting to hear other stories from other people. And because that's where we grow and we get better, and we get connection. So
great. Yeah. Thank you for your time.